demo campaign Evolved's bonus campaign, Operation Meteorite, has a very interesting story that connects to some of the most important events in Halo's lore that precede the games. It rationalizes some of the strangest past decisions and introduces some extremely out there new lore. And today, we are gonna break it all down. So, Operation Meteorite introduces a new sub-faction of the regular Covenant, the Sacristan Order, an extremely zealous arm of the hegemony led by a prophet, the inquisitive technologist Minister of Harmony. Harmony is something of a scientist, a researcher who spent much time studying ancient texts, even the most dubious of origin, devouring every stroke, every syllable. From these scriptures, he became infatuated with the Forerunners' genetic modification abilities and also his prophet ancestors' mesmerizing beauty, and believed that their kind should find a way to once again achieve such majesty. And so he spoke with the High Prophet of Truth, who seemingly commissioned his ship, the Triumph of Tolerance, to make blessed his work. Although Harmony did note that he didn't quite know if the prophets quite heard him in what he wanted to do, and so he knew that he must prove his work's worth, and more so, he must prove his own worth. In Operation Meteorite, this ship, which was an agricultural support ship, is stationed above the human colony of Promise shortly after its glassing. And on it, Harmony conducted a series of radical genetic experiments on brutes and other species within his order, but we're gonna come to that soon. The Sacristan warriors wear distinctly different armor to the typical Covenant, far more ornate in its overall designs and colors, relying on fine detailing, cloths, and sacred headdresses colored in a zealous white, gold, and purple colorway. These warriors are unlike any the UNSC encountered throughout the war, a truly unique order of zealots with a truly unique goal. However, the UNSC's goal in Operation Meteorite is also deeply special because it was the progenitor of arguably the most important operation ever devised by the UNSC, Operation Red Flag. Operation Red Flag was a 4-step operation concocted by the top brass at ONI to bring about an absolute end to the war. Step 1 involved disabling and capturing a CAS-class assault carrier or equivalent Covenant flagship. Step 2 had Spartan 2s board the ship, commandeer it, and acquire nav data to try and discover the location of the Covenant homeworld, which they believed at the time to be High Charity. Step 3 was to pilot the ship to the Covenant homeworld, and then Step 4 was to infiltrate High Charity and capture one of the 3 prophet hierarchs, of whom would then be used as a bargaining chip to force the Covenant into a truce. At this point in the war, defeat for humanity was almost guaranteed, so the death or assassination of a prophet was out of the question. Capturing it and forcing the Covenant into some sort of mutual end to the war was the only option they had left. Now, Operation Meteorite takes place in 2551, which is a whole year prior to Red Flag's creation. However, it was the events of Meteorite that made Red Flag a possibility. So, on a currently undisclosed date in 2551, the Master Chief and Sergeant Major Avery Johnson infiltrate the Triumph of Tolerance in a spirit, and do so quietly.
Boom.
Chief wears a unique variant of Mark IV Mjolnir, the Deimos-class Mark IV. Now, of course, given that it's Mark IV, not Mark V, it doesn't have an AI port, which means that it's just Chief and Johnson on this mission. There's no voice in Chief's head. With the area clear, Chief gives the signal and Johnson hops out of the cockpit and arms himself with what he calls Old Sophie, his M99 stanchion Gauss rifle, a personal favourite of his dating back to the start of the war. ONI already scouted the ship, and based on their assessment, they were sure it contained navigational data that would lead to the Covenant's homeworld. Johnson remarks that ONI's layout data of the ship seems accurate, and so, with that in mind, they set off for its command center. Using an ONI pocket hacker device, Johnson is able to break the Covenant encryption on the locked doors whilst also suppressing ship-wide alerts, which allows the two to move through the halls without having the entire ship descend upon them. On their way, they pass through an elite training room where two high-ranking Sacristan blade masters spar before a crowd of lower zealots. And then, beyond this room, they encounter another room that's piled high with UNSC boxes, weapons, and armor, something that Johnson notes was not in the Oni brief, hinting at something more going on within the bowels of this supposedly agricultural ship. And it's in this next room where we find out that it isn't exactly an agricultural ship, but rather a research vessel. They stumble across one of Harmony's primary laboratories, a facility known as a gene farm, which is filled with stasis tanks containing his genetic experiments, Halo 4 and Halo 5 elites and jackals. So yes, this seemingly confirms that the Ibishan jackals and those messed up elites in Halo 4 and Halo 5 were indeed the product of some kind of genetic experimentation. Now, that doesn't quite explain how Julum Dharma came to exist, given that at this point in the timeline, Jul is 62 years old, but perhaps he's almost a progenitor of these experiments, almost like what the proto-tyrant was to the regular tyrant in Resident Evil. Either way, he's still a freak of nature. And it's just beyond this gene forge where Chief and Johnson finally come face to face with the inquisitive technologist Minister of Harmony himself, flanked by Sacristan warriors. For some reason, they choose not to engage, which is a slightly odd decision given how easy of a kill this would have been on a prophet no less, but instead, they let the prophet wax lyrical about his divine work that bred the creatures of which he equates to the Spartans. After all, Spartan 2s were genetically modified super soldiers as well, so Harmony sees no reason why Chief wouldn't at least appreciate his steadfast dedication to improvement. But no experiment is a greater example of this improvement than Harmony's next guest, a brute. Now, the brutes were the final arrivals to the Covenant, only joining the hegemony some 59 years prior to these events, and their innate rage and aggression stood them apart from the other member species. They weren't exactly the easiest to control, but Harmony's divine belief that, in his very own words, the universe begs to be commanded, made them the perfect subjects for his experiments. He reveals something of a rage inhibitor, which he slots into the brute's chest, but upon destruction, the brute instantly goes berserk. His rage knows no bounds, and so he even targets his own. All hell breaks loose and Harmony retreats, leaving just you and Johnson trapped in this laboratory with his experiments. As you fight, Harmony unseals more chambers of his creations to ambush you, but of course, Chief and Johnson make light work of them. Now, real quick, I'd gotta just say, that device that Harmony created to temper the brute's rage is quite literally what the rage virus was supposed to be in 28 days later, and further, what happens when that device breaks is also precisely what ended up happening with the rage virus. They even tested the rage virus on monkeys, for God's sake. These brutes are quite literally rage-infected brutes. Something to think about. Leaving the lab and continuing on course for the nav data, the two detect UNSC BattleNet telemetry data nearby, which is rather odd considering that this is a Covenant ship and a rather secretive one at that. But never leaving a man behind, Chief insists that they investigate, which leads them into the ship's hunting domes. They're pretty sure that it's a trap, but Chief goes anyway. Now, interestingly, I actually think that this ship is meant to be something of a reference to the Infinite Succor, which was home to the iconic Flood origin story of Halo 2's Halfjaw set during the events of Halo 1, because that ship was also an agricultural ship that also had a hunting dome. Definitely not a coincidence. As we enter this hunting dome, Harmony says some weird and almost brute-sounding words over the intercom that are never quite explained, but that's rather fitting considering almost immediately we run into brutes who have just finished hunting a squad of marines. My bet is that these words are almost like summoning words to get the brutes enraged or to tell them that there's a hunt going on or something, because they sound very brutish. Beyond this valley, we then run into Lieutenant Williams, the leader of this ragtag group of human survivors. Williams is an ODST of Tiger Company, the 92nd Shock Troopers, who the Covenant captured when Promise was glassed. Her and her fellow troopers were taken prisoner, and then hunted for sport. She says that they're let out into the hunting domes and given a 3-minute head start, after which the elites and brutes begin their hunt. Now, Williams is an interesting one. You'd think that she'd be overjoyed to see a Spartan, but given that she's a rather steadfast ODST, not so much. See, ODSTs and Spartans have a pretty contentious history in Halo lore. Many ODSTs actually harbour great disdain for the Spartans for essentially coming in and unfairly stealing all the glory on the battlefield thanks to their augmentations, their genetic modifications, their power armour, etc. They see all of that as an unfair advantage over them being, frankly, natty, so to speak. And so, Williams tells Chief and Johnson that it's going to take way more than fancy armour and a good PR campaign to impress her. She actually makes a point of constantly referring to Chief as a PR machine and propaganda. Oh, and it definitely doesn't help that as a teenager, a freshly augmented John 117 beat 4 ODSTs to death in a boxing ring. There's definitely no bad blood about that whatsoever, none at all. But regardless of their differences, they begin to hatch an escape plan, but not before the nav data gets secured. So, Williams leads them through a series of holding cells which she quite literally refers to as brute kennels, where Harmony keeps his experiments. On their way, they encounter an elite HVT, who watches the battle from above, and always retreats to safety when engaged. And I'm pretty sure that Terminal 2 is actually about this elite and what he's up to in the hunting grounds, giving some background for his stalking of us. So it's never made abundantly clear if this terminal is written by a minor prophet or by this elite. Its author is the Apostolic Minister of Penitent Correction, of whom you would assume to be a prophet, but his name is Vajra, which, I don't know, kind of sounds intrinsically elite to me. Either way though, this terminal is relevant to the hunting dome, because it documents trials of a series of chemicals or serums or augmentations of some kind linked to the rage inhibitor. The minister says that the brutes are all unclean and spiritually vacant, but thanks to their feral cunning and aptitude for battle, the hierarchs have judged them worthy of reforging and walking the path to salvation. They are instruments of the hierarch's will and must be tested for their strength. In these trials, referred to as Gamma Trials, they applied the augmentations to various packs of brutes and then set them loose on prisoners. These augmentations have rather strange names and classifications, and resulted in varying outcomes. So the A-Ascension-03 augment, for example, elevated the cognition of its host. The O-Oath-11B suite ensured its host's will was subsumed. The P-Penance-S9 augment caused rapid coagulation effects in its host's blood, and the D/Dogma/P2 formula was a psychoactive compound which caused total organ failure after use, but somehow the body of its host was still salvageable. Clearly, Truth had given Harmony almost entirely free reign to do whatever the hell he wanted to try and sharpen the brutes into a weaponizable species. That, or as Harmony himself actually speculated, perhaps Truth had no idea what Harmony was asking for the grace and resources to carry out, and thanks to this ignorance, unknowingly agreed to essentially creating the Covenant's very own arm of the Umbrella Corp. Either way, this terminal gives some really good context for the groups of Marines that you end up rallying in the hunting dome, and also what they were going through right as you swept in and saved them. Heading back inside, you free yet more prisoners, to which Johnson gives a rather rousing speech to try and prepare them for the battle ahead.
I see that look. You're wondering if you got the guts to fight after what you've been through. You think those Covenant bastards broke you? Hell no! You're UNSC Marines! You've endured the worst they've got, and you're still breathing.
Not bad, Spartan. I'm almost starting to believe the propaganda.
And moving through the ship, you eventually reach a storage room where the experimental brutes have been packaged up into containers for shipping across the galaxy to the front lines. And I've gotta say, these containers look an awful lot like the compilers from Marathon. That cannot be a coincidence. Eventually, Chief runs into that HVT again, and after actually putting him down this time, we can finally get a good look at him. Now, on his gold headdress, there's an almost Egyptian-looking symbol of an eye or a sun of some sort. This, too, is never explained, but I can't help but wonder about its meaning. With all the Marines now freed, the objective once again shifts back to securing that nav data. And so, Chief and Johnson head out to the bridge to secure it, whilst Williams and her troopers head back to the hangar to secure an escape vector. Upon reaching the bridge, we're greeted by the ship's star holo, displaying an in-depth hologram of the burning colony of Promise. The Sacristans are trying to erase the nav data, but Chief and Johnson stop them before they can. Using the Oni hacking device, they siphon the data from the star holo, but not without Harmony chiming in once more to berate them. He tells them that he's going to relay what he's learned conducting these experiments back to the hierarchs, but before he can say any more, Johnson and old Sophie put an end to his lecture. On the way back to the bridge, he does chime in one more time and scoffs at the fact that we did all of this aboard his ship just for a map, which I gotta be honest, I do find a little bit strange. Like, does he not realise that this map that we've secured quite possibly points towards their homeworld? Maybe he just doesn't care. I mean, he is a pretty weird prophet after all. On the way back, we move through a series of rooms that only believed to be gardens or recreation bays, but given the presence of natural fauna, Chief speculates that they might be the ship's hydroponics facility, which gave me instant Dead Space Ishimura flashbacks. When the two teams rendezvous once more in the hangar, Chief and Johnson tell Williams that they didn't kill the Prophet, and so she says that they absolutely cannot allow this ship to continue to exist. It would simply haunt her for the rest of her days. They need to deny the Covenant of Harmony's experiments, and so they plan to destroy the ship. Johnson breaks the communication silence and radios into their support vessel, the UNSC Burden of Proof, requesting a fire mission on their current location. However, the Burden, being a Halberd-class light destroyer, doesn't have the tonnage to penetrate the Tolerance's energy shields. They could deactivate the generators, but that only brings the shields down for a minute or two, and it would require them to still be on the ship. And so, Williams makes the valiant call to have her and her men stay behind and keep the generators offline, sacrificing themselves to deny the Covenant their bioweapons, and also, in her own words, to ensure that a Spartan doesn't steal the glory on this one. This time, an ODST's getting all the glory. Begrudgingly, this plan is agreed upon, but before they leave, Chief takes a good look at the rage inhibitor unit, and then when he throws it on the ground, the camera kind of sticks on it for a strangely long period of time. And I think that's because the emblem on the unit is almost identical to the Banished sigil, which implies that they sourced that almost logo from this device, which, I mean, does make sense given that the whole foundation of the Banished was to break the chains of the Covenant, and this device is quite literally a metaphorical chain. To make their escape, Chief and Johnson commandeer Seraphs, but in clearing the skies around the Tolerance, Williams begins to detect a power surge of some kind within the ship, and speculates that it's either the Covenant on board initiating a wideband communication signal to try and call for reinforcements, or worse, it's the ship initiating a slipspace jump. So, to stop whatever they're planning, we destroy the ship's external relay nodes. Falling back to a local debris field, we fly through the wreckage of various UNSC ships that fell protecting Promise. As Chief says, it's a grim reminder of what's at stake. Spirits full of wounded troopers begin evacuating the Tolerance, and so we have to protect them from Space Banshees and Seraphs before eventually the UNSC Burden of Proof arrives, jumping in style. As we wait for Williams and co to destroy the final generator, the ship is assaulted by kamikaze Seraphs, which actually don't seem to scratch it one bit. Harmony also manages to escape in his personal shuttle at the very last minute, and jumps away before we can take him out. But thanks to Terminal 3, we actually get an insight into where he's going and what his plans are. So aboard his ship, he accepted defeat, but confessed that failure is an inevitable and necessary aspect of progress. He notes that the brutes have proven to be fascinating test subjects for his work, and also found that their newfound belief in the Great Journey greatly inspired him. He seeks to continue to genetically refine them to sculpt their minds and bodies to best serve the Covenant's will, and planned to convene with the Minister of Preparation once he'd adequately analysed his data. Reason being, he believed that Preparation's Chirurgeons, the Prophet biomedical specialists who were responsible for creating the Prelates, the biologically enhanced Prophet super soldiers, would take great interest in Harmony's research in concordance with their own work to unlock the potential of their own species. However, Harmony also needs a break. He needs a vacation of sorts, one he plans to spend in the Gardens of Reverent Contemplation, also known as Halo 2's Gemini. Yep, he wants to go on holiday to Gemini. That sounds pretty good right now, I can't lie. He also wants to take a trip to the Sacred Promissary, the Covenant munitions factory in the lower levels of High Charity, to see how the latest developments of the Prelate fighting skins are manifesting. His ultimate goal is to bring the full might of the Prophets to bear. And you know, I really hope that this is a plot thread that we see picked up in a game or in more DLC down the line and not in a book. I have wanted to see the Prelates and fight the Prelates more so in a game ever since Joe Staten first introduced them in Shadow of Intent 11 years ago. They are such a cool idea, and honestly, my fingers are crossed so hard right now that they're breaking that this cliffhanger is actually going to lead to that becoming a reality. Anyway, back to the mission itself. Williams brings the shields down, and the burden of proof destroys the triumph of tolerance and all its experiments. Johnson submits Williams and her troopers for posthumous commendations for their bravery, and when back aboard the ship, he also gets a call from Dr. Halsey. It turns out the nav data that we stole from the ship actually did help to locate High Charity, which is what set the stage for Operation Red Flag the year after. Now, of course, Red Flag never actually ended up happening, but I do wonder why Step 2 of Red Flag included securing nav data to locate High Charity if clearly they'd already secured that data, or something close to it, from Operation Meteorite. But at worst, that's just a little bit of a canon inconsistency. And that is the story of Operation Meteorite explained. In the coming days, I'm also going to be breaking down the main campaign Evolve story and the story of all the terminals in the game too, so make sure you're subbed so you don't miss those videos. Huge thank you to all of my amazing patrons for the continued support over there, as per usual, and thank you all so much for watching, I really appreciate it, and I'll catch you all in the next one.